This series was really about habits or consistency or productivity. At least, not in the way that I thought it was when I actually started. A few nights ago, I went back and watched the very first video again. Not because I wanted to, but whether it was actually good. And honestly, it wasn't. I wanted to see the person who made it. And somewhere around halfway through, I noticed something that caught me completely off guard. It wasn't the editing or the camera quality or even how uncomfortable I looked speaking to a laptop webcam, but was the things that I believed were standing in my way. That person felt strangely familiar and strangely distant at the same time. Because I realized something. Over these 10 videos, my life hasn't changed dramatically, but I'm still building the channel. I'm still figuring things out. I'm still making mistakes. But the person making those mistakes isn't the same person who was waiting to begin. And that's when it actually clicked. Because maybe the biggest thing that changes when you start isn't your results. Maybe it's you. When I watched the first video again, I expected to notice the obvious things: the awkward delivery, the pacing, the editing decisions that I'd make differently now. But those were all there. But after a few minutes, I stopped noticing the video and started noticing the person actually speaking. He was trying hard, like really hard. He was building routines, reading books, watching videos, trying to become more disciplined. From the outside, it looked like someone making progress. Looking back now, I think he was still waiting. Not waiting for a better camera or a better script or more knowledge, but waiting for someone or some invincible moment where everything will finally feel certain enough to begin properly. The strange thing is, he didn't know he was waiting because from the inside, it felt like preparation, like careful planning, like being responsible. But now I can see something he couldn't. Every habit he was building, every system he was trying, every answer that he was searching for was just quietly circling the same question. When will I finally become the kind of person who can start? And that's why watching him feels so strange. Because I know something he didn't. There was never going to be a moment where that version of me suddenly became ready. The only reason I don't recognize him completely anymore is because he eventually stopped waiting and pressed upload anyway. When I started thinking about what had changed over these 10 videos, the obvious answer seemed simple. I made 10 videos, but the more I sat with it, the less true that answer felt. The channel is still small, and I'm still learning. I still watch my videos back and notice things that I changed. The gap between what I can make today and what I hope I'll make one day is still there. On paper, almost everything looks unfinished. But watching that first video back made me realize that I've been looking in the wrong place for the change. The biggest difference wasn't on the channel, but was in the person behind it. The version of me who made that first video believed discomfort meant something had gone wrong. If a habit became boring, something was wrong. If motivation disappeared, something was wrong. Every difficult middle felt like the evidence that I've taken a wrong turn. So I stopped, not with a big decision, but just quietly. I would wait for inspiration to come back, wait for certainty, wait until it felt right again. Looking back, now I can see that pattern running underneath almost every video in this series. The tracker that became the goal, the routine that disappeared without me noticing, the excuses that couldn't explain themselves, the feeling of being behind, the imagined bad period. All of these came back to the same habit: leaving the middle too early. What's changed isn't that the middle has become enjoyable. because it actually hasn't. There are still days where nothing feels like it's working, days where progress feels invincible, days where the easier option would be to quietly stop and tell myself I'll come back when I feel more motivated. The difference is that those days don't surprise me anymore because I've lived through them enough times to know they aren't the ending, they're just the middle. And that's not something that I learned from a book or a podcast or even another video, but it is something that you only collect one ordinary day at a time by staying. Looking back at the whole series now, I keep seeing the same shape in every video. A story that felt like an honest assessment that turned out to be a prediction dressed up as a fact. That was quietly keeping a version of me exactly where it was. The consistency story, the knowing doing gap, the advice that wasn't written for your situation, the tracker that became its own goal, the quitting you didn't notice, the direction you stopped checking, the excuse that couldn't explain itself, the race you invented, the bad period you borrowed emotions from. Every single one was a story about what something would cost. And in every single case, without exception, the reality was smaller than the story. Not easy, not painless, but just smaller. More ordinary, more survivable than the version the story had built. But here's the thing I keep coming back to. The stories weren't just wrong about the costs, they were wrong about where I was. Every one of them arrived to me, tell you the middle difficult. That was when I was feeling was evidence of a wrong turn. That the right move was to stop and wait for something better to arrive. And every time I stayed anyway, every time I collected one more ordinary day instead of leaving, the story got a little quieter. Not gone, but just quieter. I didn't plan for these 10 videos to be about one thing. But sitting here right now, at the end of them, I can see what they are. Because every video was about the same gap. The gap between the story and what was actually there. The story about what consistency costs. What starting feels like. How long the bad period lasts. How far behind you are. How unready you still are. All of them following the same shape. A story that felt like realism. That turned out to be fear wearing the right clothes. That was asking you to pay the emotional costs of a future that hadn't arrived yet. And every time I tested one of those stories, every time I moved despite it, the reality came back smaller than the prediction. Not once or twice, but every time. That's not optimism, that's just what happened. 9 stories, 9 times the reality asked for less than the story said it would. And the person who had lived that, not read it, not heard it, but actually lives it. It is not the same person who was waiting in video 1. That person believed discomfort meant something had gone wrong. This one knows it just means that he's in the middle. If you follow this series from the beginning, you start with 10 different versions of the same question. What is this actually going to cost me? And then 10 times across 10 different stories, the answer came back smaller than expected. You know that now, not because I told you, but because you've watched someone test it. And the next time a story arrives, the one that says you're not ready, that you've been too far behind, that's the middle is going to be unbearable. That's the bad period will last forever. You recognized it a little faster than you would have before. Not gone, not recognizable, and recognizable is enough. Because the moment you can see a story for what it is, a prediction dressed as a fact, you have something the waiting version of you didn't. A choice. So test it. Because almost every time, what you find on the other side will be smaller, more ordinary, more survivable than what the story promised. The person you're waiting to become is built there, not in the dramatic moments, not in the breakthroughs, but in the ordinary days you decided to stay. One at a time, that's where they've already been built. That's where they will be. So that's the end of the first series on Ruben Knowledge Hub. 10 videos. One question running underneath all of them. That is, what is this actually going to cost me? And 10 times the answer came back smaller than the story said it would. If something in this series made you see one or your own stories differently, that's everything I was hoping for. And if you're somewhere in the middle of something right now, that is the flat part, that part where nothing actually feels like it's working, that part where the old version of you would have quietly stopped or stay, that's where everything in this series was actually built on. One ordinary day at a time. I'll see you in the next one.